I'd like to introduce our next speaker. I'm very pleased to have Angie Jones with us today. Angie is going to be talking about visual testing, her track session, your test lack vision. I love it. Adding eyes to your automation framework. So Angie she almost needs no introduction. She is very well recognized as a thought leader around the world. She's a principal architect with Apply Tools. She's involved with, with DevOps, with test automation. She also does leads the Test Automation University. Obviously a frequent speaker, heavily sought after. Active in the community, volunteers a lot, and also I didn't realize you have 25 patents. That's amazing. So just not only a thought leader, but also a leader in innovation as well. So without further ado, take it away, Angie.
All right. Hello, everyone. All right. Yes. Thank you so much for the intro. I am Angie. Work at Apply Tools and director of Test Automation University, where we offer free courses on all things test automation. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely do so. But today I wanted to talk about visual testing. But first, let's start off with a little game of Who Done It.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Action.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
So did you happen to notice the 21 changes? Or at least the one big one where the dead man got up and walked away? Probably not, right? Because we all suffer from what's called unintentional blindness. And this is where we don't notice new and unexpected things that may come into our viewport because we're so focused on a specific test at hand. And that's particularly true when you think about testing, right? So I had someone tell me not long ago that she was testing her application all day long, and the developers were pushing lots of changes, and she was so busy, and she was testing all of these features. And it wasn't until a customer later pointed out that their entire color scheme of the application had changed before she realized it. She didn't even realize it, even though she was in that app every day, all day long. And that's a typical case of unintentional blindness. She was so focused on the task at hand that she didn't notice the other changes around her. So we mitigate for this by saying, okay, well, we can automate the test, right? Because if we automate the test, then we're automating all of the steps so that they occur the same way every time, and then we automate the verification. So we know that we don't forget to look for something later, right? But what if I told you by automating your tests, what you're actually doing is scripting in the unintentional blindness. Because if you think about it, your tests, they aren't as smart as you are. They're not going to look for unexpected changes. They're only going to look for exactly what you told it to look for. And it's especially true when we talk about how these tools work, right? So many of the automation tools, they're interrogating the DOM or the document object model, their UI tests, right? And so it might say, hey, is this text present? It's going to look in the DOM. It's going to say, yep, sure is. But what about the look and feel of that? What if the text is too small, it's unreadable? What if it happens to be the same color as the background and no one can see it? What if it's covered by some other element on the page, you know? What if it's bleeding off the edge of the page, which is really common when we talk about mobile viewport sizes, right? Now, this is why you need some visual testing. And when I talk to people, sometimes they'll say, huh, that's really interesting, but we don't have, visual issues. Well, I have seen a lot of applications, and let me tell you, once you know, and you start seeing them everywhere. In fact, let's look at a few examples of some visual bugs. So this is Cineworld. This is the second largest cinema chain in the world. So not a small mom and pop shop. And they had a visual bug on the page that asks you if you want to store your credit card information. So as you can see here, the labels are not aligned with the radio buttons. Now, if you were to open this as a bug, what severity would you open this as? Would you do a 1 for highest severity? Would you do a 4 for us? Small little typo kind of thing. Most people will do like a lower severity, maybe a 3. But when you think about this, I'm going to ask this question. As a customer of this site, would you store your credit card information here? I wouldn't, right? Why not? Because it's hard to trust this page. Look at Kim. She even tweeted about this, saying that they're not doing their cross-browser testing. Even Happy Path. So when you think about this and you look at this from the user, the customer's perspective, you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, if they didn't catch this, that means they didn't test it. So what's going on with my credit card information on the back end? Who knows, So people start losing trust in your product. But I have a theory. I believe they tested this. In fact, I believe they automated the test for this. Again, the tools that we're using, they're querying the DOM. So when you ask the DOM, is the yes label present? Yeah. Is no present? Yep. 2 radio buttons? Gotcha. And therefore, it misses this kind of visual error. Let's look at another one. This is OpenTable. Now, OpenTable is where you go to make, restaurant reservations. And I used to live in North Carolina a couple of years ago. And I went back and I wanted to catch up with some of my friends. So I went and picked out my favorite barbecue place on OpenTable because, North Carolina is known for barbecue. So I came here. The Pit is my favorite. And it was going to be a reservation for 7 people. And they asked me to select from the times. So I went ahead and selected the 7 p.m. time slot and a modal appeared. Now it took me a moment to figure out what am I even supposed to do here because I don't see any actions on the sensor. But if you look over here in this upper right corner, you see that there actually are two buttons, two select buttons, which kind of further confused me because I'm like, why are there two select buttons? They're not aligned. And worse, there's nothing that's telling me what am I supposed to be selecting. So I did what any of you would do. I opened Chrome DevTools and I started digging around to figure out what are these two buttons. And once I got in Chrome DevTools, I noticed, aha, there are labels. They are just as far away from the buttons as possible. So of course, this is a visual bug, right? And this is not just a cosmetic issue. There's a real problem here because most of the users of OpenTable are not software engineers, right? They don't know anything about opening Chrome DevTools and digging around in a DOM to click the buttons on your website. No, most people would close out of this and figure that the site is just broken and they're unable to make the reservation. Now think about this. This is a pretty good reservation. It's 7 people. We haven't seen each other in years. We're gonna order a lot of food, a lot of drinks. We're gonna have a good time. So that's a lot of money, right? That this company is losing. Fortunately, because I am a software engineer, I've figured out which label went with which button and I went ahead and made my reservation because I wanted this barbecue. But that wouldn't happen for most people. Again, if this test were automated, technically everything is there and available in the DOM and it's functional. But from a human user perspective, not so much. I hate to think how much money was lost. Now, these aren't just one-offs. Visual bugs happen to your favorite tech companies as well, such as Amazon. Look at this one. So you go to not only purchase an item, but you want to increase the quantity, therefore multiplying the amount of money that you're going to spend, and you're greeted by this visual bug that's preventing that transaction from happening. Again, if this was automated, it would be able to select this stuff without having to worry about, oh, it doesn't look that great on the UI. Happens to Facebook. Look at this. This is not just where you go and talk to your auntie, but this is their marketplace. This is where you're going to spend money. And look at the text on the side. Look at it ugly on top of the images. I don't know about you. I don't want to spend my money here. This doesn't make me want to spend money. Instagram. This one is my favorite example because Instagram is such a visual site. Yeah. In fact, people spend money to have prominent showings of their advertisements, which is what this is. Notice that this is sponsored. This is sponsored content, and yet it's all jumbled up. Same like with the Facebook example just before, your automated test would pass. Is the text present? Yep. It doesn't know that it's going vertical. Is the text present here? Sure is. It doesn't know that it's all jumbled on top of each other. And think about this advertiser. I'm sure Instagram ads are not cheap, right? So this is money lost for them. It's trust loss for Instagram. As a advertiser, I probably wouldn't want to buy any more ads here. Happened to Twitter. Look at this, where all of the tweets are overlapping one another. You can't use this. What do? You close the app right away. Would your test work? Sure would, because all of the tweets are there. All of the text happens to be there. But again, visually, this is very wrong. Even happens to Google. Now, this one isn't as bad an example, but it is a point of purchase. And you have this text that's bleeding off of this button. This is Google. They're not going to let that stay there. But what that means is that some highly salaried employee at Google has to stop innovating new features to go chase the text alignment on a button, right? The great news is we don't have to live like this. So visual validation can be automated. This can become a part of your test. And let me tell you what visual validation is, or visual testing. So visual testing is where you have a screenshot taken of your application when it's in its great state. You know, when you're doing that initial testing and you're like, yep, everything looks perfect, you get a snapshot. And then on your regression runs, you can run the test again and a new snapshot is taken, or a screenshot. And these two images are then compared to see if there are any bugs, any differences in the images. Now, visual testing isn't entirely new. This is something that's been around in our industry for a while, but the approaches that were taken before were not really good for testing, right? Let me show you what I mean. So most of those tools were using pixel-to-pixel comparison. Some of them still do today. Most of them do today. But the pixel-to-pixel comparison method, unfortunately, is really flaky because it's so sensitive. It's just not designed for testing. Let me show you some examples. So in this first picture, this is where your application is in its great state and you say, yes, okay, this is what I want my app to look like. Let's take a screenshot of it. And then the second example is on a regression run. So let's say this is part of CI, right? So the build breaks because there's a difference between these images. Can you see what the difference is? Yep, it's that Google search button. So on the second example, the Google search button is bolded, but not the first example. Well, is this a bug? No, actually, when you hover over that button, that's the effect that it makes. So it just so happened in this automated test that the cursor happened to be placed over that button and therefore caused an issue. So how do you solve for this, right? Do you then write some code within your test to make sure that you move the cursor out of the way? No one wants to write that kind of code, right? And when you move it out of the way, where are you moving it to? So this is annoying. It's very annoying. You don't want your build to break and your deployment to be stopped for something like this. Here's another one. Why did this one fail? Can you see? Yep, the cursor. So on the first one, the cursor is solid and the second one is not there. Well, cursor's blank, right? So if it happened to take the screenshot when that cursor was there and then it took another screenshot on regression and the cursor happened, it caught it in that split of a second that it wasn't there, now your build is broken. Again, not what you want. So now what do? You start writing some code to try to make sure that maybe, the cursor isn't right there at all or something like that. Icky code, not what we're getting paid to do. Fortunately, Applitools has come out with a much more sophisticated approach to doing visual testing, which uses machine learning to mimic the human brain and eye and only highlight the differences that we care about and that we would notice as human beings. So I ran a spot the difference. This is another game. You all don't get to play because you let the dead man walk away in the first game, but I ran this typical spot the difference game. I ran it through a pixel-to-pixel tool, and then I ran it through the Applitools machine learning API, which is called EYES. And I wanted to see how differently they behaved. How did they treat this, right? So when I ran it through the pixel-to-pixel comparison, this was the result that I got back. Overwhelming, right? So everything is pretty much highlighted, not just the differences that I would pick out as a human being, but it's super sensitive where every little white space shift has caused a problem. Again, not good for testing. This is not built for testing, right? Versus running it through the Applitools EYES, and we can see here now it spots the difference that we would spot as humans. So this is a much better approach for testing software. All right, so we're going to add this to an existing code base, a test automation framework. Let me show you the application. All right, so here's the app, and it is a simple single page application that has 8 of my favorite books on testing, right? And the way this works is really simple. You can filter these books down, so you can filter it by like title or author or whatever. So let's say I put in Agile. I see the one book that has Agile in its title. If I put in test, I see the books that have test, you know. So that's the application. And let me show you the test for this. So far we have 2 tests. One that searches for the full title. So we put in Agile testing, we search it, we make sure that there's one book that, we make sure that it has the right title, the book that is visible, and then we make sure that it's the only book that came back, right? All right, and then in the second test, we're going to do the partial title. So we put in test, and here's a list of the books that we expect to come back. And then we make sure that each one of those books is visible. And then we make sure that those are the only books that's visible. So this is a pretty decent test. Both these pretty decent. However, let me take you into this is book visible. Let's have a look in here. So if we look in this method, we find all of the visible books on the page, and then we get the text from each of those books, and we make sure that it equals the text that you asked us for, okay? All right, now that's great, except if we look at this again, there's a lot more on here than just the title of the book, right? What about the authors? What about the price? What about the thumbnail? And that's really important, because when you're searching for books, think about it. When you go to Amazon or something to buy your book, when you put it in, you kind of have a visual of the book you're looking for, because you saw the cover advertised somewhere, or you know, your friend told you about it or something like that, right? So all of these things are also pretty important, and yet they're not covered in our test. Now, I could add all of those attributes. The image part would be a little bit tricky, but I could at least make sure, you know, maybe the URL of the image was there, and, you know, there's not a 404, but I can't guarantee that it's the right image, that it's actually showing what it's supposed to show. But the rest of the stuff I could, but I would have to write a whole bunch more code to do that. Not only that, let's say I wrote all of that extra code. I went the extra mile because I wanted to be a good tester, right? Okay, not a problem. What about though, let's just run this right now. Let me move this. Let's run this right now and just make sure that it works as is. Okay, perfect. The tests are passing. Great, right? Okay, now let's put our developer hat on for a moment. And we go into the CSS for the application. And, you know, we've just taken some CSS course and we're feeling pretty good. We want to use some of the tricks. So I want to add like maybe like a little bouncy effect to this application. So I'm going to just add a single line of CSS, and I have tests, right? You know, we got our developer hat on. This is how a lot of them think. So I have tests. I can just go ahead and check this in, because the tests are going to run as part of CI, and the test will let me know if I broke anything, right? All right, so before we run the test, let's just look at what this is going to look like. We're not the developer didn't do this, but let me just show you what actually happened. So with one line of CSS, I have literally flipped this application on its head. But we have tests, right? All right, so let's run our test and let's catch this nasty bug. So we're in CI, the developer has checked this in. We run these tests, the books are upside down, but oh my God, the test still passed. Yes, this is what I was saying in all of those examples. This is querying the DOM. Does this title exist on the books that's visible? Yes, it does. Not realizing this whole thing is flipped upside down. So you see now why we need some visual testing, right? Okay, so let's add it. I'm gonna take the bug out and we're gonna add some visual testing so that we can catch these sorts of things. Now, I'm gonna go into, I could add the visual testing right here in these tests, but I'm gonna put it at the higher level up so that we can reuse it across any test. So the first thing I need to do is to go ahead and declare the API. So again, the API is called eyes. I'll just name the object that as well. I think eyes is just so cute, right? Because visual, yeah. All right, so we declare it, we need to initialize it. So I'm gonna do that maybe after I launch the application. I'm gonna say eyes equals new eyes. All right, so we got our visual testing object there. And to do the visual test, it's 3 steps. Let's make a little method here that will do that. So we'll say protected void, let's say validate the window, right? Here are your 3 steps to do the visual testing. Step 1, open your eyes. Poetry. So we say eyes dot open. And we need to pass it our driver. So I'm using Selenium WebDriver for this example, but this eyes API works with like all of your favorite test automation tools. So Cypress, WebDriver IO, Test Cafe, Playwright, all of the kids, Capybara, everybody. All right, so open your eyes, we give it the driver, we give it the name of the application. So we'll say automation bookstore, and then we give it the name of the test. Now, since I'm putting this at a higher level, I don't know what the test's name is gonna be because I just want any test to be able to call this validate window method. So I'm gonna hack this a little bit, close your eyes, it's not the prettiest thing ever, but I'm gonna basically get the calling method. All right, good, cool. All right, so we said open your eyes, that was step 1. Once your eyes are open, go ahead and take the picture. So to take the picture, we call check window. And after the picture is taken, last step, close your eyes, we're done here. Beautiful, very simple, right? Okay, so what we're gonna do in our test, let's go to the big test, right? All right, so we're gonna say this is what we wanna enter, these are the books, blah, 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 and validate window. And voila, I've added visual testing, right? But think about this, when I add that visual testing, remember it's gonna take a picture and it's going to compare the 2. All right, so if it's comparing the 2, then it's going to make sure that it's the right number of books. So I no longer need that assertion. It's going to make sure that all of those books are visible. I no longer need that assertion. Now I no longer need this list. Oh my God, I'm deleting code now as opposed to adding code. And my test becomes this simple. Do your action, take the picture. Done, right? Okay, so let's run this guy. Now, here's what's going on behind the scenes. So we run this, your application opens as usual, and this could be headless or not. But what it's doing is it's taking this picture and then it's sending this up to the Applitude's cloud, right? And the picture is stored there. It's not stored on my hard drive. I don't have to worry about it. I didn't have to do anything. I'm literally done. You saw the test. It just passed. I'm done. I'm going to take you to the dashboard, though, because I want you to see the picture just so that you know what's going on. But this is not a required step. You don't have to come to the dashboard. All right, so here is my Amplitude's dashboard, and I see that I have a new test here. It has all of the details about the test. I click on it. There was no baseline because this is the first time that this is run, but this is what it will look like, right? So as a tester, you probably may want to look at it, but you don't have to, right? So I'm looking at this just to say, yep, this is the ideal state I want it to be in. Yep, all of the books are there. Yep, perfect, right? From there, you run this as regression, and again, the test will run again and compare the images. So let's go and add that little bug back in here where we flip the app on its head, and we didn't catch it with our traditional approach, but let's see if the visual testing will capture it. So again, taking a picture, sending it up to the cloud, and then it's comparing the two to see if there are any differences, right? If so, it will fail like it did here. And when it fails, you see you get this diffs found exception, and it tells you which test failed, of which application. It also gives you a little link to go to that test, all right? So notice here, this is marked as unresolved, which I kind of like, and I'll tell you why. So again, this technique is using machine learning. And I often hear the question of, you know, will machine learning take our jobs as testers? And this is a perfect example of how it won't, right? So machine learning, yeah, it did some great work here, but it defaulted to me, the human being, its master and overlord, to say, hey, human, I did catch an error, but you're much smarter than me. You have more context. You come and check it out for me, right? I say, okay, sure. So I come in here, and when I open this, notice now I can see the baseline, and I can see the new image, and it's highlighted all of the things that were different between the images, right? And I say, oh, okay, yep, you're absolutely right. This is a bug. All I do is press this thumbs down, and now this is marked as failed. I could also do things like, you know, add a bug report to this. So there's annotation. So I could, you know, write a bug here. Basically, I could link this to Jira where the bug gets assigned to someone and all of that good stuff. And the great thing about that is my report can be very simple because I have the visual here, right? So I don't have to go in a whole lot of detail about what's wrong. All right. So let's talk about, wait, let me bring this back up. Let's talk about this a little bit. I want to talk about what are some pros and cons to using this approach, right? Because everything, no matter how good it sounds, everything has some drawbacks. Yes, we know this as testers. So, okay, let's start with the pros. Let me see, anybody talking in the chat? Okay, so anyone, pros and cons of this approach, if you want to post. Hey, Ivan. Okay, so someone said fewer lines of code. That's absolutely correct, right? So that's a great pro. I like to say that a picture is worth 1,000 assertions, right? So I could have written a whole bunch more code to try to capture everything that I can think of, but no, fewer lines of code. Let the picture capture it, because guess what? It's going to capture more things that I can even think of as the human being, right? And it'll catch any of those things that I would have missed and not had assertions for. Any more pros? Any cons that you can think of? All right, everybody's quiet. All right, so a con for me is that it's capturing everything, right? So that's also a pro. It's a pro and a con. The pro is, yeah, I don't have the unintentional blindness here because it's basically verifying this entire page. But the con of that is it's verifying this entire page. So for example, if this title were to change, then this test would fail. Now think about this test. This test is a search test. Do I care if the title of the page changed? Maybe not, right? If there were other things that are going on this page, or, you know, maybe if the page was still under development or something like that, it was always changing, then you could find yourself in a pickle with this approach. So it says it may vary if the screen resolution is different. That's a good point. The great thing about that is these things collectively make like a unique identifier. So the name of the test, the operating system, the browser, and the viewport size. So with the different resolution changes, if I were to run this test again and my window was a little bit smaller, it wouldn't compare that to this. It would make a new image for that because, like you say, it could look different depending on what's the viewport size, okay, or the screen resolution. All right, great. Great. So the good thing about this is that the eyes API is super flexible. So in the cases where I don't want my entire screen captured, I can scope this down. I can narrow it to any part of this page. So I can say only verify maybe this specific element or this specific area of the page and ignore everything else. All right, so let's do that. Let me show you how that works. First, let's fix the bug. All right, so we fixed this bug. Okay, and then we're going to, let's say for this test, we just have the one book. So this is a good example. I just want to verify that one book, not like the whole page, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into base test. And I'm going to make another similar method here. But instead of validating the window, we're going to say validate the element. And then if you call this guy, you need to give it a locator or a selector. All right. So I still say open your eyes. Instead of saying check window, I say check element. And this takes a by or a web element. So I can just go ahead and pass that locator in and close your eyes, right? And so now I have two options. I can validate the entire window, or I can validate a specific area or elements, okay? So if I go back to this test, I am going to say validate the element, and I already have the locators stored in here somewhere. Let's see. I can't tell what's selected yet. Okay, here we go. And yep, okay, so we're getting the locator for this specific book. Again, I don't need to have all of this stuff here. I can delete this. Is it visible? That's going to be already captured. Now I'm not reusing this variable, so I'm getting rid of that. Look at this, how beautiful. And I can get rid of this too. So voila, do the action and take the picture. So think about how quick you can put out tests when, you know, you don't have to write all of that additional code. Okay, so let's run this one. Okay. So again, opens it up, takes the picture, but this time it's not going to take a picture of the entire screen. It's going to find that area in the application. So this book, and then take just a picture of that and send it. Done. We're done. I'm going to take you to the dashboard, but we don't have to go to the dashboard. I'm just taking you there just so you can see, as I know you're curious. You're a tester, right? So if we look at this, voila, it only took a picture of the book. right? So what's some pros and cons of using this scope down approach? Anyone? All right, I'll help you out. So pro is it's scope down, right? So now we can focus on what we want to focus on and ignore any other noise that may be on the page, right? So this can help us get away from like brittle tests or something that is picking up some changes from active development and stuff like that. The con here is, if you really think about it, we reintroduced that unintentional blindness. Yeah, we did. Because let's look at this application. What did we put in? We put in agile testing, right? So let's say that, let me refresh. Let's say that we put in agile testing here and nothing happened. The application is broken, right? The filter part is broken. So is this test going to pass, or is this test going to fail if this filter is broken? Yes. The test is going to pass. It's going to pass because think about it. What that did was said, let's find this element. Does this element look beautiful? Yes, it looks perfect. It looks just like the last time we looked at this element, right? We purposely told the API to ignore everything else that's going on this page. So as Daniel just mentioned, you can miss some things using this approach. Still great news. Visual testing doesn't have to be a replacement for your functional testing, right? You can couple it with your functional tests as well. So if I'm going to scope this down to say only look at the area, then I, the human being, I have to be diligent about what I might be missing and making sure that I capture that, right? Again, great example of how machine learning can assist us as testers, but it can't take over, right? You're still in charge. You still have to do some thinking here. So if I'm only going to validate this one specific element, I need to also make sure that maybe it's the only book that's visible. Okay, so that would ensure that if that filter was broken or some other books were returned, that this test would indeed fail. So I'm coupling the visual test with the functional one at this point. Right? Another approach could be, instead of just taking a picture of this book, you take a picture of this entire results section, right? So that's another option for this. So you can get around it. You can make it whatever you want it to be. You just have to be thoughtful of what it is that you want, and are there any blind spots that you're missing? Okay? All right, great. All right, so another thing that people ask me often is, okay, well, my application is dynamic, right? So we don't have like this static data like this. How can I test it? I guess I can't use visual testing. Not true, you can't, because it's just that flexible, right? All right, so what I'm gonna do here, let's make another test. And we'll call this one dynamic layout, right? Okay, so for this one, I'm not even going to do any searching or anything. I just want to verify the page. So I'm just going to say validate window. And we'll get the picture taken. So let's just go ahead and run this, and this will be our baseline test, right? So you do need to run it one time, just like you do when you're doing your regular automation. You run it one time, make sure it works before you check it in, right? So same kind of thing. So we're running this, and it takes the picture, sends it up to the server, all that good stuff, right? All right, now what I want to do is I want to go inside the JavaScript, and I'm going to switch the order. So I had them out of order. Let's just switch this back. Did it switch? Come on, come on, come on. All right, so I got those in order now. Now, if I run this test right now, again, of course, it's going to fail because the pictures are going to be different, and it's going to spot that that book is out of order. But let's say that it's dynamic. Let's say I don't know what order the books are going to be, and they can change all the time. Great. All I need to do is set the match level. So eyes has another call on it called set match level. Exactly. And the match levels, there are 4 of them, right? So the first one is the default one. That's the one we've been using. We didn't have to set it. It's already by default. That one is called the strict one. So that does, you know, your normal visual testing. The second one is pixel to is exact. Exact does pixel to pixel, but I already told you pixel to pixel is bad. Don't use the exact match level. The third one is content. So this basically validates your app, but it goes colorblind. So it removes all colors and only compares the content of your application. So this is good for, you know, if you don't know what color is going to be, or maybe, you know, users have customizable profile colors or things like that. And then the final one is for the dynamic one. So that match level is called layout. And so this says only verify the layout of my page, not the content of my page. All right. So we're going to run this test again after we switch the order of the books. And what's going on here is this is going to use machine learning in a different way. So it's using machine learning now to detect what's the pattern of your page, right? And we see that that is passed already. So let's go over here to the dashboard and see what we got. So this is our new test, and we can see here, we see Cucumber is the second book, and then Advanced Selenium and Java is the third. But in this one, Advanced Selenium Java is the second, and Cucumber is the third. So you see that these are switched. However, we also see that the method, the match level was layout, right? So it doesn't matter. These can be in any order, and it's still going to pass. And this is really useful for getting into pros and cons now. This is really useful for companies that have dynamic data. So when I worked at Twitter, we would use it in that case. You saw those ugly tweets. We didn't want that to happen again, but we weren't really sure of what the tweets were gonna say. But like I was saying, it uses machine learning to detect a pattern on the page. So a tweet has a certain kind of pattern, right? It's gonna have a picture and then a name and, you know, a date and blah, blah, blah. For this application here, this has a pattern. So it's, you know, some squares, and each square seems to have some purple rectangle in the upper right corner with some white text, some image with, you know, overlay with a bold text followed by a not bold text, you know. So it's basically using machine learning to detect the pattern. As long as your page still matches that pattern, it'll pass. Now we could also preview this in different match levels. So again, strict is the default match level. If I said show me this in strict, we could see if I would have run it in strict, it would have indeed have caught that these books were out of order. Okay. All right. So pros, very flexible, right? Cons, maybe a little too flexible. The con here is that it only validates the layout of the page. Is everything aligned? Does everything look good? It does not verify the content of the page. So for example, when I switch these books, what if I accidentally messed up the author or something like that? And now Seb was on the Advanced Selenium book and Paul was on the Cucumber book. this would have still passed because it's not looking at the content, only the layout, right? So again, you, the engineer, need to figure out when do I use this and in which way. So the way that I typically use it, if I use this one, I don't use this method often at all, actually. But when I use it, it'll be on something like smoke test, where I just want to make sure that the application is up and everything is okay, and then I'll have some deeper testing going on. I'll also use it if I'm verifying the content, maybe on the back end. So I want to make sure the UI looks good, and then maybe I'm gonna, you know, verify API or something like that, or database call or something to make sure that the data is how it's supposed to be, right? So that's how I use this method. All right. So let's see. Last thing I want to talk about is the cross-platform. So this is a new complement to the eyes API, and it's called ultra fast grid. So anyone who has done any cross-platform automation, you know that this is a difficult thing to do, right? It's tedious, it's hard. Your pages, when they're in these different, not just the browsers, but like the different sizes and stuff, when they're in like mobile view versus desktop view, you have different elements you have to account for. So your code starts having like conditionals, and it's just not a fun thing to do. Fortunately, there's the ultra fast grid, which, oh my God, it like works like magic. So what this does is you run your test the one time. You only write it the one time. You don't have to say, this is my test for mobile, this is my test for desktop. You write the test one time. Let's say you're just writing it for Chrome on the desktop, right? So you do this and you execute the test, and when you're ready to call the visual check, what this will do is grab your applications, DOM, all the resources that go with that. So the CSS, the JavaScript, grab all of this, and then it's going to blast that across any and all of the configurations that you specify. So you want to run on Chrome and IE and Safari and Edge, and you want to run in laptop versus big desktop monitor, and you want to run on maybe iPhone 10 and 11 and, you know, Galaxy, and you want to run in portrait mode, and you want to run in all of the, just specify it, list them out. You don't have to write these different tests all the time. And what it's going to do is when you make the call to say, check my window, it's going to, again, grab everything and blast it across all of the configurations that you specify and take pictures of all of those. And it's doing it in parallel, so it's really fast. And then you get testing on all of these different, you get cross-platform testing across everything without having to go through the pain of writing all of this code to do so. So this is an example of like my applications and all of their different views. Let me quickly just show you the code. I don't have to touch the test at all. I don't have to mess with the test. All I need to do is specify my configurations, right? So when I specify, here I am, I say, okay, I want Firefox Chrome, I wanted 800, 600, I want 1200, 800, I want iPhone 10 and landscape and portrait, and same for Galaxy. So that's my configs. That's what I want to run against, right? And then I run this, I give this little object to the eyes call. So when I initialize eyes, I can say I want to run the grid too. And then let me take you there. And so when I do that and I run my test, you see that all of these tests just run. And let's take a look at some of the pictures. Look at this. So it put my application in the state that it's supposed to be in, the viewport size. So same pixel density and size as the browser. So you see, like, this is my Galaxy. This is, you know, iPhone in one of those modes. I get portrait and landscape mixed up, but this is galaxy in like normal mode. I think this is landscape maybe mode, and voila. So yeah, you see like all of the different sizes, and all of these run like so fast. So there's some developers that have written blog posts, and it's like, oh my God, I ran like 100 plus UI tests in less than 20 seconds, right? So it's super fast. So that's pretty cool. All right. So that's visual testing in a nutshell. Very flexible. You can couple it with your functional test. You see that it wasn't difficult to integrate it with your existing code base, or if you're starting fresh, that's an option as well. There is a free account, so I recommend like you use that. And again, it works on with any of your favorite automation tools as well. All right, so what questions do you all have? Let's see.
Awesome. Looks like we have one question for you from Patrick asks, how would layout match level handle a situation where the rows in an application are not a consistent size?
Yeah, as an example, one row could be taller due to its amount of content versus other rows. Yeah, so if you're going to use the layout mode with that, oops, yeah, so you could specify like certain other things. Let me go back into the dashboard. So there's all sorts of things you can do in here. Let me just grab one of these. And all of these annotations here, like you could say a floating region. So say for example, like if this one was a little bit taller, then this whole thing would come down some. So I can put it on like this whole thing. I can put it on one item in there or whatever, like maybe that one would be short. But I'm basically saying that this thing can float, meaning it could grow, it could get shorter, it could be pushed up, it could be pushed down. So keep that in mind, machine learning, as you're validating this. So it'll know like, okay, this is a little bit, you know, longer than it was in the original picture, but he told me that it was a floating region, so great, it's okay. So that's one approach. Other things that I didn't necessarily show you, you can do, you can ignore anything as well. So I can say ignore stuff. So for example, when I do mobile testing, this whole top thing, like when I'm actually in a mobile device like Appium or something like that, this whole top thing is the status bar, right? And the status bar is going to have all of these different things on it that, you know, I just don't even want to verify. So I can say ignore this portion, and I can apply these annotations programmatically, or I can apply them here by just drawing over them. So for future runs, it would ignore this top portion, right? So that's great for things like dates, timestamps, ads, stuff like that, that you don't care about verifying. Also, like let's say that you do care about verifying, like maybe I have an ad here. I want to make sure the ad shows up, but I don't know what the ad is going to be. You can mix and match, right? So I can say, okay, that's a dynamic content. So this ad space, I want you to verify that part of the picture as layout mode, and the rest of it do default strict mode. So you can mix and match the modes as well. Okay. All right. If you want to reach out to me, let me put my info back up. So yeah, this is, I'm at angiejones.tech. That is my website. You can contact me on there. Or if you're on Twitter, I'm techgirl1908. My DMs are open, so feel free to message me. Again, definitely check out Test Automation University. Free online courses, self-paced videos taught by industry experts. So definitely check that out.